Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, konnichiwa, namaste. My name is Peter. I'm the chair of Blue Orchard, and I'm super delighted to welcome all of you to our first ever virtual field trip. It's going to be an exercise, really looking forward to that. We're all super excited, spending the next 2 hours together, traveling the world and talking to some of the most renowned leaders in the financial world, as well as obviously micro-entrepreneurs in emerging markets, addressing topics relating to fighting poverty and the effects of climate change. We'll be traveling from Lima to Tbilisi, from Tanzania to New Delhi. We'll have speakers from Tokyo and the UK, so this is going to be really spanning the entire globe. And therefore, please bear in mind that this is the first Impact Summit of its kind. Obviously, we have rehearsed our internet connectivity, but we'll only know in roughly 2 hours' time if our outposts have really been able to broadcast in good quality. And as you all know, countries Blue Orchard is also active in, are confronted also with digital exclusion. So please excuse us if there are any interruptions. We have been obviously overwhelmed by the number of participants, by you. I just heard 15 minutes ago. We are assuming over 600-700 participants only today for today's shows. Unbelievable. From over 40 countries, making us extremely proud, honored, and happy that you are joining here. And most likely, this probably is going to be one of the biggest gathering at all in impact space, with all of you participating. So thank you so much. I had the opportunity to interact you will have the opportunity also to interact with questions during all the sessions, the next 2 hours. But please, do bear in mind, if there's so many participants, we won't be able to address every and all questions you might have. Of course, we'll get back to you in due course in case we're not able to really handle your question. Some of you participated for sure in one of our Impact Summits a couple of years ago in the Swiss Alps. You might record that. Today, we can proudly say that we as Blue Orchard, together with all of you, we have kept our promise. We have continued to work together to strengthen our partnerships, to increase our impact. And this is reflected obviously in a huge increase in the amount of being invested globally for impact. Today it's over $2.3 trillion according to the IFC. And Blue Orchard, being member of the Shoulders Group today, has clearly played a role in filling this gap. And I think we all have lived up to our responsibility. And for that, I also would like to thank all of our partners. However, due to the pandemic, major global changes such as poverty and inequality have unfortunately also increased. For the first time in 2 decades, the amount of people living in extreme poverty has actually increased again, obviously with significant consequences for health, education, and gender equality, just to name a few. And the latest IPCC report, I assume most of you have read it, considers also that the Paris Agreement of limiting the global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius is unfortunately out of reach. With that in mind, for the next 2 hours, we invite you to join us, take a deep dive into the world of impact, learning from industry experts about the role of financial inclusion, education, gender equality, and climate action to tackle all these challenges. Ebony Satti, our head of investor relations, whom most of you have met over many years, and Philipp Müller, our brilliant CEO, are going to host you through the program and through the next 2 hours. Thanks, guys, for preparing everything and making this possible. We are really looking forward to that. But before we start our journey now, I would like to point out that 2021 is, as some of you might know, is a real special year for Blue Orchard, as we are celebrating jointly our 20th anniversary. As you know, Kofi Annan has been an initiator of Blue Orchard as the former UN General Secretary 20 years ago, initiating the activities of Blue Orchard and putting the fight against poverty and inequality right at the forefront, which today is obviously still our mission. But we also have been very fortunate to pursue this mission with a great team, management and board over the last 20 years. I would just like to point out with these three pictures, you see Ernst Brucker together with the Nobel Prize winner Mohamed Yunus. In the middle on the left, Melchior Demurald from Geneva. And right on the left, the one and only Omar Kandil. I remember he's actually sitting on a tractor, I think it was somewhere in Sri Lanka, on one of our joint field trips. And of course, there are many other people who are hardworking, involved. I would just like to name a very few. Stephen Mills, obviously, Carolina Palueto, we've got George Wunderlin, Sinika Demar, we've got Patrick Scheuerle, Ted Uemai in Tokyo, and many, many others. And I would just like to send out my gratitude to all of you and really making this possible over the last 20 years. We also have received a couple of messages from partners who have been following us over the course of the last 20 years. And some of them have honored us with speeches. And I would like to first give the voice to Her Majesty Queen Maxima, who initially intended to be physically here. Unfortunately, she has not been able to be here, but she has specifically asked me to read out the following message to all of you. So on behalf of Queen Maxima, congratulations to Blue Orchard on its 20-year anniversary. From its early focus on developing a sustainable microfinance sector to pioneering the use of in-house performance impact measurement tools, Blue Orchard has shown firm commitment to advancing financial inclusion through impact investing. Blue Orchard continues to show leadership of cross-cutting issues affecting the economic lives of the poor, including climate change and persistent gender inequalities. And a message to the broader audience, to all of you, she would also like to give, and please also let me speak out in the names of Maxima. I challenge today's participants to reflect on how impact investors can reach further scale and impact. More investments in frontier institutions that serve to truly develop financial markets, intensify collaboration amongst private sector stakeholders to promote scale and greater detail and transparency in impact measurement can help drive positive outcomes, improved financial health, resilience, and economic empowerment for vulnerable segments. This challenge is more important than ever given the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly for women who have been disproportionately affected. These improvements will also be critical to fill the financing gap necessary to achieve the SDGs as we look towards 2030. Very warm thank you, Queen Maxima, for these wonderful words. And I'm sure you would have been more polite in reading it, but I did do my best. The next message is from someone who has been a trusted partner for us for the past 2 decades. It's the famous Swiss banker and our close friend, Patrick Audier from Lombard. Please, Patrick.
As Lombard was one of its founding shareholders, it is with great pride, but also with emotion, that I would like to wish Blue Orchard a very warm happy 20th birthday. Having pioneered the concept of microfinance, Blue Orchard has in fact paved the way to impact finance, which is today becoming mainstream with the unique support of the Schroeder Group. A remarkable achievement indeed, and a contribution in establishing the financial industry as a solution provider for an effective sustainability transition. Well done. Congratulations and best wishes for the next 20 years.
Thank you, Patrick. Much appreciated. As you know, Blue Orchard has also very strong network and cooperation with development finance organizations. One of these institutions, the famous IFC Institute, with Momina Azajudin. She's the IFC's global head of microfinance. We've been working together for many, many years. And let's listen to you, Momina. Thank you for joining.
Hello, this is Momina Azajudin at the IFC. Just wanted to congratulate Blue Orchard and your team for this wonderful landmark achievement. I know Blue Orchard has been a pioneer in impact investment. We have a long and trusted partnership with Blue Orchard, which includes co-investing in many different spaces, including MIFA, which was a fund for microfinance for Asia, for which I was very fortunate to have been part of the board at inception for 6 years. What I really appreciate about Blue Orchard is the strong network that you develop in resolving what are very complex development issues in microfinance. Blue Orchard has also been very active in the impact investments that IFC had launched. We have over 100 signatories from approximately $400 billion in terms of impact, and Blue Orchard has shown very strong commitment in this space, whether through being a signatory, developing tools, and also being a member of the Impact Principles Advisory Board. So for that, we're very grateful, and we look forward to a continued strengthened partnership with Blue Orchard as you develop your space even further. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Momina. Super kind of you, much appreciated. Now, last but not least, we've got one last statement from our dear colleague, Amit Puri. Amit is the CEO of our Global Impact Investing Network, short named GIN. Most of you will all know it. We are very honored also inviting Amit for a very short message to us. Morning, Amit.
Hi, my name is Amit Bori, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of the Global Impact Investing Network. It is my incredible honor to congratulate the Blue Orchard team, past, present, and future, on this incredible milestone achieving 20 years. Happy anniversary. I want to thank you for all the impact that you've had through your work, all the lives that have benefited, all the communities that have been uplifted, and the profound impact that has had on generations who will benefit from the financial inclusion that your work has helped to foster. I also want to acknowledge your indirect impact, because I think that is so important as well. You've helped to pioneer a model of promoting financial inclusion around the world. You've helped to demonstrate that financial performance and impact performance can go hand in hand. And of course, you've helped to promote sound impact management practices, which are now going mainstream at such an important time for the world. And last but not least, I'd like to thank you for your commitment to the work that we do at the Global Impact Investing Network, working with us to show the world that there's a better way to invest, to show the world that if we want a truly sustainable, just, and inclusive world, we have to invest in it. Congratulations, happy anniversary, and I wish you all the best for all that the future holds for you.
Thank you so much, Amit. Many thanks to all of you on behalf of the entire Blue Orchard family and team, and also all of you out there. We are honored. I have to say I'm personally extremely touched by all these messages, and what we have been experiencing, in particular also this year in celebrating our 20th year. So thank you so much, and obviously all of you being present today, sitting out there wherever you are in the world. That's what Blue Orchard is. That's what we're about. You make it happen. Without you, we would not be standing here. So again, I'm really touched. Thank you so much for all of your support from the bottom of my heart. Now, Ebony and Philip will actually start taking you to this official part of today's Impact Summit. They will take you on a fascinating trip around the world. And if you agree, Philip, I'll just hand over the word directly to you. Really looking forward.
Thank you very much, Peter, and hello everyone, and a warm welcome from our side. We will be your guides on this virtual field trip.
Good morning, good afternoon.
And very grateful as well for these wonderful messages. And next, we want to lay the ground for our virtual field trip. And despite all the progress that we could achieve and that was achieved over the last decades, there's still a lot that we can do.
That's right, Philip, and there are various ways to go about it. We have invited 4 experts to present to us top-down the main topics of this event: financial inclusion, climate change, education, and women empowerment.
And first, we will hear from Peter Harrison, Schroders Group Chief Executive, about the single biggest issue, inequality and how financial inclusion can address it.
Good morning, it's Yorick from London. It's a great pleasure to be with you today. My name is Peter Harrison, Group Chief Executive of Schroders. Inequality correlates with pretty well all of the world's ills. It's a truly awful thing that not everybody is participating in the growth of the global economy. Today, 1.7 billion people are unbanked in the world. And yet, in a strange way, I feel optimistic. And I feel optimistic because of one anecdote which sits very tightly in my heart. And that's the story of a lady in Phnom Penh who, through a very small $50 loan from BlueOrchard, started to collect rubbish direct from stores, recycle that rubbish, and with a further loan of $500 and a loan beyond that of $5,000, she now has a thriving business, has rehoused 6 family members, has access to medical care, and has narrowed inequality. 1.2 billion people have been offered new financial products since 2011. We're starting to have an impact on inequality. The pandemic took us back a long way. It's undoubtedly one of the most challenging periods of the global economy, but most of all, it was one of the most challenging periods for inequality. I'm incredibly grateful for you spending the time to spend with us today to hear more about our global field trip and to properly understand how finance has the power to transform. Inequality is the single biggest problem that this world faces. It's the single most pressing issue for the finance sector. And to my mind, it's the single most important thing for us to have an impact on. Thank you for spending the time on it. And I hope that you get as much out of understanding of the global field trip as I've been able to over our partnership with BlueOrchard. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for this important reminder. And as you've just heard, we still have a long way to go. The same holds true when it comes to climate change. The recently published IPCC report, as Peter alluded to earlier, warns us there is little to no time left to reverse the damage that we have caused. Right, Philip?
Absolutely, Ebony, and time is not on our side, and we are all one way or another affected. In growth markets, billions of people are working in agriculture, one of the main areas affected by climate change. And one of the leaders in agriculture technology, Ophir Ardon, the CEO of AgriTask, will now share his insights and tell us how technology can play an essential role in combating the effects of climate change.
Hello from Tel Aviv, and thank you very much for having me. I'm very happy to be here. Climate change is a global challenge, and we've seen the world start to rise to this challenge, both from a national leadership standpoint, as well as from corporate and private sector, all placing a greater focus on socially and environmentally friendly practices. But the reality we see is still far from being where we want it to be. Most nations are still far from achieving their carbon emission 2030 goals. And on the corporate side, despite the vast amount of promising initiatives, we've yet to see how funds turn into concrete actions that generate sustainable impact. In the meantime, developing markets are more exposed to the increase in weather variability. It is estimated that developing markets will suffer 5 times more in terms of direct damage as a share of GDP compared to developed markets. This is due to their heavier reliance on the more sensitive sectors, such as agriculture. And to make matters worse, much of the agriculture in developing countries is rain-fed. This leaves farmers and their communities entirely weather dependent. And thus, building climate resilience in these countries is of such extreme importance. In the agriculture and food sectors, this involves 2 main aspects. One is adapting through better practices. introducing basic irrigation systems, or controlling pests more effectively. The other aspect is of a longer term, and it's addressing the root cause of the problem, or shifting to carbon-smart practices via sustainable and regenerative agriculture, farmers' incentives, and more. In the interim, risk transfer mechanisms are becoming more and more important, and these must be used in order to shift the great risk from the individual farmer to institutions such as governments, NGOs, or private insurance. To do this, technology is crucial as we are dependent on the availability and quality of agronomic data. We are dependent on the ability to collect and share this data effectively, to generate transparency and intelligence from this data, and above all, to have it accessible to the farmers and at the same time to the entire ecosystem at wide, food and beverage supply chains, credit organizations, and insurance-related organizations as one. Thank you very much for viewing.
Oh, wow. I don't know how you feel about this, Philip, but these are some very sobering insights. Thank you very much, Ophir. I look forward to hearing more about this when we hear the story from our first end client in Peru and our panel later on.
Yes, but before we do so, let's listen to Russell Mills, the CEO of Netpol. Russell, who in his prior function as the Secretary General of Business at the OECD, has been heavily involved in driving forward access to education.
Impressive creativity, to the participants for their passionate enthusiasm, and acknowledge the OECD for their pioneering work in global education. We all have roles to play in elevating education. Frankly, the facts on equity in education are frightening. A child whose mother can read is 50% more likely to live past the age of 5 and twice as likely to attend school. In sub-Saharan Africa and South and West Asia, nearly a third of children drop out before finishing elementary school. COVID has widened these gaps. 1.5 billion students from 188 countries face major school lockouts. Over 30% of students in developing economies had no access to remote learning. Historically, being born to poor parents was the start of a life of evaporating opportunities. However, deprivation does not have to equal destiny. Already 10 years ago, the 10% most disadvantaged 15-year-olds in Shanghai were achieving better results in maths than the 10 most advantaged in many OECD countries. However, our digitalizing economies will force a mindset change. Learning repetitive tasks that can be mimicked by machines must be supplemented with creativity and innovation. Children are born with an inherent love of learning, so rearing children should be less like factory farming and more akin to a prestigious zoo where the power and beauty of diversity can be fully enhanced. In poorer countries, each additional year of schooling increases incomes by up to 10%. So education is not just a taxpayer burden, it's a lifelong investment. Education, in its broadest sense, should always be our starting point. This is often underestimated in governments, thus providing some unique opportunities for impact investing. The COVID pandemic has stimulated innovations, but also added to cost concerns. In addition to paying for books and uniforms, or perhaps a solar light to enable evening homework, many poorer parents will now have to finance access to the internet. This is where microfinance is playing a critical role in enabling parents to extend their children's education. Such investments are top of the league when it comes to lifelong impact. Rebuilding a more equitable educational system requires broader stakeholder collaboration, enhanced training and rewards to incentivize teachers, and technologies, educational technologies that complement rather than replace humans. This is far from theory. During the pandemic, many countries developed innovative best practices. Chile used TV and radio to extend digital learning. Brazil used public-private partnerships so the poorest could access school meals. Colombia set up mobile phone educational sites that could be accessed free of charge. These innovations were led by people who understood that rising up the educational ladder today means moving up societal wealth tables tomorrow. The examples are numerous. The evidence is clear. What we now need is more action. The speed, flexibility, and reach of microfinance gives us this opportunity to act, thus avoiding the worst consequences of a lost generation. We can all deliver impact by investing in these solutions. Thank you.
1.5 billion students that face major school lockouts, digital exclusion. That's very concerning. Thank you very much, Russell, for this overview. It's been very, very interesting, and thank you for these insights. Now we want to move to the last but not least main topic before we start our virtual field trip, and this topic is gender equality, a topic which affects developed as well as growth markets, although emerging markets are much worse off.
Yes, Philip, you're right. And for this introduction, we have the pleasure to listen to Monika Beck, member of the management board of DEG, which is part of the German development bank KfW.
On behalf of KfW DEG, congratulations on the 20th anniversary of BlueOrchard. Over 2 decades, BlueOrchard, in close cooperation of leading DFIs, has been one of the standard setters in several core topics. Gender equality, and in particular women empowerment, is globally a highly relevant focus topic, given the vital role women play for families, communities, societies, and the economy as a whole. Women empowerment implies equal access to opportunities in a broader sense, as for education, finance, jobs. It strives for empowering women not only economically but also socially by improving, for instance, self-esteem. In addition, there's clear evidence that women empowerment leads to better economic and social results. It's clearly proven that, for example, mixed management teams perform much better than management teams dominated by male only. In order to achieve gender parity, the buy-in of all stakeholders is very important. Institutions, media, banks, and specifically and importantly, male counterparts play a very important role. Progress has been achieved to date, but still millions of women are excluded from access to equal opportunities. In particular, COVID-19 has adversely affected the progress made so far.
All right, big thank you to Monika and our other guest speakers for highlighting these profound issues we still have to solve. And one way to do this in a sustainable manner, as Peter Harrison mentioned earlier, is impact investing.
You're right, Ebony, and with microfinance being a very successful tool and an area where BlueOrchard has been at the forefront for 20 years now. This leads us actually to one of our first destinations of our field trip, taking place in Georgia, where we have one of our biggest office, or soon biggest office, and I could just visit this office 3 weeks ago. It's a wonderful country, really nice people. People are so welcoming, hospitable, very good wine, very good memories.
Yes, Philip, so many wonderful memories that come up when thinking about Georgia. I remember, and I will never forget, when I joined BlueOrchard, my very first field trip was to Georgia. And one story, one client in particular, he was a winemaker, and he spontaneously invited the whole group into his house. They offered us coffee and cake, obviously wine, and it was just so touching to see how generous and how welcoming they were. It's an experience I will never forget. And actually, this is also the first time I met our Chief Credit Officer, Normunds Smissis. Normunds will now introduce us to the concept of microfinance and provide us with some local insights. Hi, Normunds. Hello to Tbilisi.
Hi, Normunds.
Hello from Georgia.
Hi, great to have you with us. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And maybe what I would like to start here talking about microfinance is the way how this value chain emerged. And it was really to address the concern for people not being able to access finance through traditional financial services providers, and that can range from hundreds of thousands of people in smaller countries to hundreds of millions of people in places such as India. And about 20, 30 years ago, the value chain really started on a wholesale side with financial development banks, bilateral or multilateral banks that were providing seed capital to various microfinance investment vehicles, funds, and later on those were joined by the private investors, and currently there are also large privately owned microfinance funds which companies like ourselves manage and then channel these resources provided by investors to a microfinance sector and to microfinance institutions, which then on lend to those who are typically excluded from formal financial sector, to micro-entrepreneurs, households who use these resources to provide and start or expand income-generating activities, and obviously we also help with the collections and repayment of these funds back of these resources back into the funds. And then talking about Georgia, which has fairly large and successful microfinance sector, there's a population of about 3.7 million people, and about 4% of them live below the international poverty line, which is $1.9 US per day per household. However, based on national poverty line, which is higher than international one due to the higher cost of living in this country, we currently have close to 20% of people below the poverty line here. But that is a significant improvement from 38% back in 2010, and really microfinance has played a significant role in helping reducing the poverty and increasing the incomes of micro-entrepreneurs and also family households. A few interesting facts maybe about Georgia. As it was already mentioned by Ebony, about 8,000 years ago, the first wine was produced in Georgia, and currently it is considered the country where first winemaking has appeared globally. There's also the highest permanent settlement in Georgia within Europe at approximately 2.3 thousand meters. And it is also one of the world's most diverse ecological country with 12 climatic zones from subtropics to desert, 49 types of soil, and 43% of territory covered by forests. And in the wake of COP26, when we look at the CO2 emissions per capita, it's 2.54 tons in Georgia, which compares to 7.4 tons in China and 15.2 in the US. So even from ecological perspective, Georgia is not a major contributor to CO2 emissions. And talking about microfinance sector in Georgia, it has been very successful, as you could see from the numbers, in reducing poverty. And the reason for this success is open economy. It is specialized legislation and regulation that was introduced early in developing the system. It is one of the better regulators here in Georgia in the region, which is National Bank of Georgia. And there's also still relatively high group of population that lives below the poverty line. However, it is rapidly reducing.
Very, very interesting. Thank you so much, Normunds, for sharing these insights with us. And next, we have the first interview with an endbower who has been very successful thanks to microfinance. His name is Valiko Sukashvili, and Nino Pataraya, one of BlueOrchard's senior investment officers, interviews Valiko for us. And this is Valiko's story.
Zitsart უკვე პირველ ყოვლის და ისევ გავიმეორებ, რომ ძალიან დიდი მადლობა, რომ ჩვენთან ხართ და მონაწილეობას იღებთ BlueOrchard-ის მიერ დაგეგმილ ივენტში. ჩვენთვის ძალიან საინტერესოა და მნიშვნელოვანი მცირე მეწარმეების ისტორიების შესახებ გაგება, მათი წარმატების ისტორიების შესახებ ცოდნის მიღება და ასევე, რა თქმა უნდა, გააზრება, როგორ ვეხმარებით თუნდაც ჩვენი საქმიანობით, როგორც BlueOrchard-ი, რა წვლილი გვაქვს იმ წარმატებაში, რასაც თქვენ ასევე მოგვიყვებით ახლა უკვე აი ამ ვიდეოში. თუ შეიძლება დავიწყოთ მაშინ ერთმანეთის გაცნობით, მოკლედ რომ მოგვიყვეთ თქვენი შესახებ, თქვენი ოჯახის შესახებ და შემდეგ უკვე გავყვებით შეკითხვებს უკვე თქვენს ბიზნესთან და კონკრეტულად წარმატების ისტორიის შესახებ.
მე ვარ ვალიკო სუხაშვილი, საგარეჯოს რაიონის სოფელი პატარძეულიდან. ყავს მეუღლე და ორი შვილი, რომლებიც ჩართულები არიან ამ ჩემ მცირე ბიზნესში. კიდე რა დავამატო?
დავამატოთ, მოდით ცოტა დეტალურად თქვენი ბიზნესის შესახებ, რა საქმიანობთ, როგორი არის ეს ბიზნესი, როგორი პროცესებია იქ და ასევე ვიცით რომ თქვენ გაქვთ ფერმა და გვაინტერესებს ზომა, მაგალითად როგორ ამხელა არის, როგორი არის, როგორ ააშენეთ და ასე შემდეგ. ანუ თქვენ ყავთ კვერცხისმდებელი ქათმები, ანუ ეს ფერმა არის.
რომელიც არის დიახ, სამი ფერმა, თავი წისქვილით, თავისი საწყობით, თავისი სამაცივრე მოწყობილობით.
საინტერესოა, საიდან გაგიჩნდათ ეს იდეა, რომ მაინც და მაინც დაგეწყოთ ფერმერობა და მაინც და მაინც მეფრინველეობის მიმართულებით.
იდეა სოფელში რომ ცხოვრობ, იყიდება და ჩვენ წინ მდებარეობს იქვე ერთ დაახლოებით 700 მეტრაში ფერმა, რომელიც იყო კომუნისტების დროიდან აშენებული, რომლებიც ყიდნენ ხოლმე აი მეორად გამოწუნებულ ქათამს, რომელიც ისევ ჩავსხი და მუშაობდა ისე ცოტა პროცენტი ჰქონდა დაბალი, დიდი პროცენტი არ ჰქონდა. მაშინ 2005 წელში გაჩნდა ჩემი იდეა, რომ ამეღო კრედიტი და ავიღე კრედიტი კრედოდან 2005 წელში. ის ბიჭებიც მემეხმარნენ, სახელები არ მოხსოვს და მე ავაშენე და გავაფართოვეთ. არა, ვიყიდე ქათამი, მე წავიდა ბიზნესი და 2008-ში გონი ისევ კრედოდან დავიხმარე და მეხმარნენ, გავაკეთე თურქთან ერთად ის ფერმა, რომელიც ააშენა რა, კონიადან არის ის კაცი, დურანა, რომელმაც ჩამომიტანა დააპროექტა და გააკეთა ეს ფერმა. ხო და ეს და 2019 წელში ისევ ვიყიდე მუსაქვიან იმას და გვარი არ ვიცი, პატარძეულისა საქართველოში მუშაობს, ისაც აზერია ის კიდე, იმისაგან ვიყიდე, რომელმაც თურქეთთან შემოიტანა ეს პუტულუსანის ახალი გალიები, გამოვიღე ეს ძველები, რომელშიც ჩადიოდა პირველად 5000 და ეხლა ჩადის 10000. იმ წუთში დატვირთულია, ქათამი მუშაობს და რა.
და დღეს რამდენი ქათამი ყავთ ფერმაში?
21000 ქათამია დღეს.
ძალიან კარგი. მნიშვნელოვანი ზრდა არის რაოდენობაში. და თუ შეიძლება ასევე კითხავთ დღევანდელ მდგომარეობაზე, იმიტომ რომ ძალიან რთულ პანდემიურ სიტუაციაში ვიმყოფებით, ძალიან ბევრისთვის შეიცვალა გარემოება, როგორც ბიზნესის, ასევე თითოეულ ოჯახს და თითოეულ ადამიანს შეეხო ეს რთული სიტუაცია, მით უმეტესად ეს ლოკდაუნები, ყველაფერი, რაც პერიოდულად ხდება და გარკვეული შეზღუდვები ბიზნეს აქტივობაზე. ეს როგორ შეგეხოთ და როგორ გაუმკლავდით, ძალიან საინტერესოა თუ მოგვიყვებით.
პირველად მართლა ძალიან ცუდი იყო, უცბად გაჩერდა ყველაფერი, ეს მოხდა მარტის თვეში, ყველაფერი გაჩერდა. ნათლუღში მქონდა რეალიზაცია, სადაც ვაკეთებდი 90%-ს, გაჩერდა 112 დღით ეს ბაზარი და კრედო ბანკმა დიდი შეღავათი გააკეთა ჩემ მიმართ და რა ვიცი, ის არ ვიცი, რომ 3 თვე გადაავადა ეს რო პროცენტი ის არ შეგქონდა კრედიტი და ნელა ავეწყეთ. მოიტყვია მართლა ავეწყეთ. ამ აუყოლეთ ფეხი ამ პანდემიას. დღეს რა ვიცი, ყველაფერი კარგი არის დღეს. პანდემია კი არის, მაგრამ მე მგონი კიდე გაიხსნა ეს რესტორნები და ეს მაღაზიები თელის იმით ამუშავდა და რა ვიცი, გამოვიდა, რავი, გამოსწორდა დღესდღეობით კვერცხის საქმე გამოსწორებულია საქართველოში.
გასაგებია და
ასოციაციაც ეგრეთ ჭკვეთავს და რამე.
რამდენად მნიშვნელოვანი იყო კრედოს მხარდაჭერა აი ამ რთულ პერიოდში და ანუ ზოგადად როგორ შეაფასებდით, ანუ ზოგადად მხარდაჭერა როგორ პარტნიორი და ზოგადად კონკრეტულად შემდგომ უკვე პანდემიის პერიოდში.
ყველა დაწყება თითქმის კრედოსთან ქონდა კავშირი. ყველა ახალი პირველი დაწყების კრედოც თანხით დავიწყე, მეორე დაწყებაც 2008-ში როცა ვაშენებდი, როარ შემეშალოს მგონი 20 ან 25,000 ავიღე კრედოდან, რომელიც კიდე დამეხმარა და გვერდში დამიდგა. ეხლაც დაგჭირდა გვერდში დამიდგა 30,000 რო ავიღე კრედო ბანკი. რა ვიცი, ყველაფერი დადებითია კრედო ბანკისაგან, ჩემ მიმართა ეხლა.
და ასევე საინტერესოა კრედო გარდა ფინანსური დახმარებისა თუ იღებდით?
ისედაც გვერდში რჩევები, ბევრი რჩევები ქონდა. პირველადაც რო ავიღე, მაშინაც ბევრი რჩევები, მეკითხებოდნენ, იყვნენ რომ ნახეს რას ვაკეთებდი რაღაცეები, აქ ესე გაკეთდეს, აქ რაღაცეების რჩევები, ძალიან დადებითი რჩევები მქონდა კრედო ბანკისაგან მე.
ძალიან კარგი. სასიამოვნო ამის მოსმენა.
დღესაც მოიყვიან კაი რჩევები და ყველაფერი კარგად არის კრედო ბანკთან დალაგებული, მაქვს კარგა საქმე. ჯერჯერობით.
და ბოლოს თუ შეიძლება გითხრათ უბრალოდ თქვენი განწყობა და მოლოდინები როგორია მომავლის შესახებ და ასევე რაიმე რჩევას ხომ არ გაგვიზიარებდით?
მოლოდინები ძალიან კარგი, იმიტომ რომ მართლა არსებობს ამ ქვეყანაზე ისეთი რომ მიხვალდა დაეყრდნობით და რაღაც გაბედავდა, რაღაც ბიზნესის დაწყება გინდა თუ რაღაცა, მიხვალ გაესაუბრები და ძალიან კარგი ის არის და დანარჩენი, არ ვიცი.
დიდი მადლობა.
ოპტიმისტურად განწყობილი ვარ, თუ კიდე გავაფართოვებ, ვცდილობ რომ გავაფართოვო, მექნება შეხება კრედო ბანკთან. რაც კი დავიწყე, ყველგან დადებითი აურათი შემხვდა და კაი იმით, როდესაც ავიღე კრედიტი, ყველაფერი წინ წავიდა კრედო ბანკისაგან.
ძალიან კარგი, ძალიან სასიამოვნოა ამის მოსმენა და ამაზე დავასრულოთ. ძალიან დიდი მადლობა თქვენი დროისთვის და ყურადღებისთვის და
Thank you very much for this very interesting interview, and thank you for joining us, Nino and Normans. I understand that now we have time for one or two questions from the audience before we move to our next location. So I will pick the toughest one for you, if that's all right. And no, but in all seriousness, we have quite interesting ones. And one is about what you have been mentioning before, Normans, that Georgia has really evolved and is catching up fast. So a question to you, Nino. Is there any difference how banks and microfinance institutions source and retain their clients in Georgia?
Sure. Let me start maybe by saying that firstly, Credo, as it was mentioned in the previous piece, is really the largest financial services provider and also one of our key partners here. But it will be also true that you can see the differences. Although it's a bank, you could see the differences how Credo Bank and other microfinance institutions would originate their clientele, and it's really the relationship. It's much more labor intensive. There's much more personal touch to it, much more frequent visits in finding out how these businesses are doing and what kind of support these institutions can provide to micro entrepreneurs and micro businesses. So I think the key difference for me would really be that relationship that exists between clients of the microfinance institution and the microfinance institution itself, and the care that the institution takes in supporting their own clientele.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that. I think we have another one, which goes in the same direction, maybe something to you, Nino. And he says, what kind of support, other than financial, do you think microfinance lenders could provide to their borrowers to contribute towards their financial inclusion goals?
Yes, thank you, Philip. So from client stories, we usually learn that financial support is important, but likewise, I could say that non-credit offerings bring very strong value additionality to the end borrowers as well. Microfinance lenders operate and gather experience as well as market intelligence on certain sectors, either it is trade, services, agriculture, manufacturing, And they also have some homegrown sector experts for underwriting and risk control in this area. So it is usually very valued when microfinance lenders are sharing their expertise and provide business advice to their borrowers. And this was actually also very strongly emphasized by the end borrower that we had a pleasure to meet in Georgia for this interview. Loan officers actually visited his business premises, provided advice related to the capacity and productivity of the hen houses that he expanded very impressively, and advised also on the potential channels for the sale of his product. So in financial inclusion context, we can conclude that such small, maybe not very small additionalities in a form of non-credit offerings like consultancy support in this specific case has greatly positive impact on the success of small entrepreneurship. And it also helps to, as Norman's mentioned, to build very good relationships with the clients.
Thank you very much, Nino. Thank you very much to the audience for these great questions. There will be more time for more questions at the next stop. And the ones that we could not address here live will be addressed later on by our team.
Thank you, Nino. Thank you, Norman.
Thank you to Tbilisi. So the next stop on our field trip takes us to Peru, and this is one of the first field trips that I did when I joined BlueOrchard to the north of Peru, to Piura. And I think it's also a really important country for BlueOrchard as well, right?
Yes, Philip, it is indeed a very important country for BlueOrchard, which also went through a rough phase because of COVID-19, but fortunately they fared quite well.
Indeed, and today we are joined live by Jan Gröger, our Regional Director, Africa and Latin America. Jan has a very impressive background and track record, having lived in many countries in South America and also in Africa, and he knows the local circumstances inside out. Thanks very much for joining us today, Jan.
Hola, Jan.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear
Hello.
us?
So, thank you, Philip. Yes, it's a pleasure for me to take you to Peru today. And as you said, it's a country we know very well. And since we have our office there located in Lima, the capital, and it's a country which is very well known and famous for its diversity, for its also quite dynamic economic development, and of course for its cutting-edge cuisine, which many of us know. Also, the country the microfinance sector is known for very The microfinance sector is also known for very well positioned and regulated. And so let's maybe start with some basic info about the country, right? So it's located on the western side of South America. It's the third largest country on the continent with a population of 33 million. And it's also seen as an emerging market economy, right? So it's characterized by rather high levels of foreign trade. And also overall income-wise, it ranges, I guess, in the middle class with a GDP per capita of about 13,000 or so. However, the average masks, of course, as we have also heard before, this very high level of inequality, which is very typical for Latin America, as 32% of the income is actually only held by 10% of the population. And that is, again, why also microfinance plays such an important role in this country specifically. Maybe now to really the issue that we wanted to talk more about here, which is climate change, right? So why is climate change so important for Peru as it is for many emerging markets, as we have heard, but really Peru specifically because of its geography, right? So the country is really divided in three topographical regions, if you want, right? So you have the Pacific coast. On one side, you have the Andean highlands, La Sierra as it's called, and you have the Amazon basin, which covers, by the way, 60% of the territory. As a result, of course, the country is amongst the most ecologically diverse in the world. So you find many, many different species, habitats, and so forth. but it's also led to a kind of very specific distribution of the agricultural activity, which mainly comes from the river valley on the coast, right? While in the Sierra, the agriculture is more of subsistence nature, and in the Amazon basin, it's really very just beginning. So the agricultural activity very focused, let's say, on this river valley region. Now, 27% of the population work in the agricultural field. So that's really an important income generator for many families in the country. And now it's precisely those river valleys that have been so affected by the El Nino phenomena. No? So El Nino phenomena, we know, is really this weather phenomena which is usually accompanied by very heavy rains, sometimes even drought. So it's really this very strong climate event which affects agriculture in the region, and which has affected the region for many years already. We even found today that archaeological investigations have found 2,000-year-old floodwater farming embedded in canal systems, right? So this is really a phenomena that farmers had to deal with for many years, going back to ancient times. But of course, today, as a result of climate change, these events have intensified as the planet continues to warm and have become much more unpredictable in a way, no? And so this is why the El Nino situations and similar weather situations, highly unpredictable, still with all the advancement in technology, still continues to cost farmers crops and increases poverty when it happens, right? So that is really an important impact. And it will cost, it's estimated, it will cost Peru over 50% of its GDP by 2100. So that maybe as an introduction to the country and really why climate change is so important in its impacts for Peru and agriculture over there.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much, Jan, for this overview. As we've just heard, Peru is struggling a lot with the consequences of climate change, but don't take our word for it. Let's listen to one of our enborers in the field. His name is Cesar Julio Salirosas Pacheco, and you caught up with him a couple of days ago, right, Jan? Jan, can you hear us? You caught up with him a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
Some delays.
Can you quickly share his background, please, Cesar's background?
Absolutely. So we have talked to Cesar, is a farmer in Peru. And I've talked to him last week. He's in this region that I've just described of the northwestern river valleys around Piura, and he's focused on different types of farming. He started with rice. He then moved to mangoes, and it's kind of really this great example of people have been adapting to climate change by changing products. And so it's really interesting to listen to his story. And with that, I would really like to move into the interview we did with it a couple of days ago with him.
Great, thank you very much, Jan. Let's listen to Cesar's story.
Tal vez la primera pregunta era si se podía, por favor, introducir qué es su actividad. Está trabajando en esta actividad desde mucho tiempo. Si nos podía un poco comentar esto para empezar.
Bueno, primero, ya, empecé. Mi nombre es César Julio Salirosas Pacheco. Vivo en la parcela Salirosas. Tengo 7 hijos. 3 hijos profesionales y 4 todavía siguen empezando su educación, secundaria y primaria.
¿Y usted ahora en qué actividad está? Entendemos que tenemos una campa. Sí.
Claro, nosotros ahorita yo lo que me encuentro en la actividad lo más importante, la siembra de mango. Yo empecé sembrando arroz primero. Por escasez de agua, escasez de las lluvias, del clima, del cambio climático, comencé a sembrar mango. Porque el mango es una planta silvestre que resiste a la humedad y resiste al calor. Son las dos cosas que resisten. No es solo calor, sino también la lluvia. Es la planta más fuerte que se puede invertir más acá en Piura. Aparte del limón, aparte de la palta, ¿no? Que yo tenía sembrado.
De acuerdo. Y usted en la Mashamba ha trabajado con microcrédito, con el crédito. ¿En qué esto realmente le ayudó a funcionar mejor?
Claro, yo empecé más o menos la agricultura en el 2010, ya empecé. Y yo empecé, como ya no había dinero, empecé con los créditos del 2011. Desde ahí empecé a trabajar con la Caja Piura. ¿Y para qué? Si no fuera la Caja Piura no tuviera nada. Ahora estoy más o menos arriba, como se dice, ¿no? Estamos progresando bastante. Por intermedio de los créditos que nos brinda la Caja Piura.
Y usted los créditos que fue uso para empezar a sembrar, a desarrollar, usted hacía arroz antes, había mencionado, ¿no? Entonces era para empezar con el arroz.
Claro, primero empecé con el arroz, créditos para el arroz y también saqué un crédito para comprar una parcela, para apoyarse, para comprar y para trabajar, ¿no? Para hacer producir la parcela. Así como decir, por el crédito por campaña, se paga por cosecha. Así nos dan acá los créditos.
De acuerdo. Perdón.
Siga.
No, siga usted. Perdón.
Acá, por ejemplo, Caja Piura nos autoriza su crédito, nos otorga su crédito para campaña. El arroz 5 meses, el crédito 5 meses. No es como el banco que te da mensual. Acá yo pago cada cosecha. Un apoyo bastante que nos brinda la Caja Piura.
Y mira, un tema que tal vez me gustaría hablar con usted es, y lo ha mencionado antes, ¿no? Cuando decía que la minería no es un producto sostenible y empezó con el arroz, pero luego el arroz también se vio impactado, ¿no? Por los temas del niño, los fenómenos que llamamos climáticos, ¿no? Que pueden ser el niño. Y eso, ¿cómo usted puede explicar un poco nos podrías explicar cómo funciona, cómo le ha impactado el niño en esto?
Yo empecé como agricultor, ¿no? En el arroz, sembrando arroz. Mi proyecto era sembrar arroz. Como todos les veía que estaban sembrando arroz, yo también dije, voy a sembrar arroz. Compré parcelas para sembrar arroz. Pero como vino la corriente del Niño, cambió el clima, el cambio climático se fue demasiado de abajo, se fue arriba, y ya no abastecía el agua. Perdí mucha plata en el arroz. Cambié de arroz, cambié a sembrar palta y mango. Y limón, 3 productos. ¿Y para qué? Estamos bien, estamos en un buen momento. Por el clima. Ahora el clima ya está demasiado cambiado, hay que optar por sembrar otra cosa que no te consume mucha agua.
Y en temas de otros temas, de otras posibilidades de protección, ha encontrado productos, no sé, con el banco o con aseguradoras que pueden también ayudar de ahí.
No, acá nosotros trabajamos con las aseguradoras, no hay aseguradoras acá. Si hubiera fuera bueno, porque yo perdí como 2 hectáreas de tierra.
Claro.
Y perdí mucha planta en la corriente del Niño, me perdí más o menos como 1.500 plantas de palta en producción, que es un montón de plata.
1.500 plantas perdió, 1.500 plantas ha perdido.
1.500 plantas perdí, 10 hectáreas perdió, 10 hectáreas.
Ok, yo creo que con eso ya más o menos hemos hecho algunas preguntas. No sé, ¿algún otro tema que esta vez usted quería tocar con nosotros?
Yo quería tocar con ustedes por el tema del agua. El agua acá en San Lorenzo y Piura es lo más principal. El gobierno se preocupa solo de otras cosas, se preocupa de la agricultura, pero no se preocupa del agua. Sin agua no hay agricultura. Tiene que haber agua, tierras sobran. Acá en Piura, en el departamento de Piura, en Perú, sobran las tierras y falta el agua. Si hubiera un proyecto de agua de otra empresa, de una entidad privada, sería bueno. Pero lamentablemente estamos así como estamos en el Perú. Pues.
Bueno, muchas gracias por esos puntos adicionales y gracias por la entrevista también.
So Cesar, thank you very much for these insights. And as Cesar is asleep, hopefully sound asleep or about to get up, as it's not even 6 a.m. in Lima, we have a question to Jan. But before I do that, just thank you again, Cesar, for sharing your insights. It's been very encouraging to see how you managed to build up your farm from the ground. And now to you, Jan, I have one question to you from the audience, interest of time. And this is really on the insurance offerings here. So it says, how has the insurance offering developed in the Peruvian market? Can people like Cesar even have access to insurance?
Yeah, no, it's an important question. Thank you. And it has to do exactly with what Cesar was talking about. No, so he had started with rice, he then switched to mangoes. And really the reason is that the different crops can be heavily impacted by climate events. So they're really one of the solution to support entrepreneurs, farmers like Cesar, is to have insurances that can cover against climate risks, right? And it has also been part of let's say, our strategy and investments in that country, you know. And so currently these products are really developing, and we see institutions now starting to offer this product. It's still early stage, but we see really a strong take up there. And so hopefully also soon these products will reach Cesar and the farmers of the region in Piura.
Okay, great. Thank you very much to Jan. Muchísimas gracias to Cesar. Now, talking about climate change, this is the perfect segue into our first panel of today, Code Red for Humanity. Industry experts will now share their know-how and experience with us, and the panel is moderated by our very own Ana Maria Montero, a former CNN journalist. It's great to have you with us today, Ana Maria. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much to both of you for having me and for allowing me to join you in your virtual field trip, and to all of you for being with us today. Now that we've heard firsthand the very real consequences of climate change in places like Peru, we're going to move the conversation forward now into what is and can be done about it. Before I introduce the guests that will be joining me, I'd just briefly like to take a step back and just clarify a few terms. Often impact investing, socially responsible investing, so SRI, and ESG investing, environmental, social, and governance, are used synonymously. However, they're not the same. In simple terms, SRI and ESG investing are about the application of exclusion and inclusion criteria and focus on the conduct and governance of the company in which the funds are being invested. Impact investing, on the other hand, is the conscious and intentional decision to invest in order to achieve a previously defined, measurable social and/or environmental objective alongside a financial return. In the impact investment sector, this concept is commonly known as the double, triple bottom line approach. Now, the range in investment approaches, as you can see, is wide, going from traditional investing, in which is purely about financial gain, to ESG investing, the incorporation of ES and G, of course, and finally over to the other end, which is philanthropy, which is purely about social impact. Now, to help us dive deeper into these tools and how they are being used around the world, joining me now in the studio is Johanna Kubb. She is Head of Responsible Investment at Zurich Insurance Group. Welcome, Johanna.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for being with us today. And then, of course, joining us from Japan, we have Mr. Tadashi Maeda. He is Governor and Representative Director of Japan Bank of International Corporation, JBIC for short. Good evening to you, sir.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And calling in from India, Jatin Singh. He is founder and managing director at SkyMet Weather Services. Good afternoon to you, Jatin, and thank you for joining as well. It's a pleasure to have all of you with us today. All right. So I think that we can all agree that in the last 3 years, so since the last Blue Orchard Impact Summit, we've witnessed a significant growth in ESG or impact labeled products, right? And nowadays it seems that every finance institution seems to offer something along these lines. So Johanna, if I may start with you, lay it out for us. What does that investment landscape, investment opportunities landscape look like from where you're sitting, and how has it changed in these last 3 years?
Well, in general, as you say, it's been growing, and I'm very glad that you laid out a little bit the various terms. And I think today we want to speak about impact investing mostly, and also about climate change. And really, impact investing, that landscape has grown a lot as well. In the past 3 years, it has solidified. So the Global Impact Investing Network has been founded a decade ago, and they've really helped coin that term and bring the community together. And they have an annual survey to ask members what they define as impact investing, because there is no one standard. And they estimate the market size at about $715 billion US. So that's quite a lot. And that does only partially account for the green social sustainability bond and sustainability linked bond markets, which have just about 2 trillion outstanding issuance. So that's social and green in combination. It really grew. And also the market is solidifying in terms of standards. So 3 years ago, the operating principles for impact management have been founded. Zurich is also, and also BlueOrchard, founding members of this organization to bring standards and transparency to the market, and today stands at about 144 signatories. So massive growth, a lot of standardization, more quality, and then of course climate impact forms part of that for mitigation, transition, and adaptation, because all of that requires financing.
Absolutely. And what do you see when you think of challenges on the landscape? What comes first to mind? I mean, there are a few, I am aware, but what jumps to mind?
Well, definitely. I mean, at Zurich Insurance, we're a responsible investor, so we apply all of those tools that you've just outlined, but we're also an impact investor, and we have a net zero 2050 target to really contribute to climate change. And that means we also want to finance the transition. And the biggest challenges we find is that a lot of the opportunities are not yet necessarily customized to the needs of large institutional investors. And also a lot of the impact, both in transition and especially in adaptation, needs to happen in emerging markets. And it's also not always easy for institutional investors to be very active in emerging markets. So those are some of the barriers we need to tackle.
All right, thank you for that, Johanna. Tadashi, if I may, what is your experience in the Asian market? How active is JBIC?
Yes, we have been very active in the Asian market, but our portfolio has been very wide globally spread and diversified. So roughly 20% of portfolio going to Asia. And we are government-sponsored the bank, and autonomously managed by the board of directors, which I chair. Our main function is to mobilize a private fund by taking a risk mainly to emerging and also less developing countries. And most recently, we have been shifting the gravity operation from the traditional financing to ESG-related financing, including impact investment. Before COVID, I actually participated in the BlueOrchard sponsored Impact Investment Summit in St. Moritz, Switzerland. And at that time, I made my speech at the summit. And this is a very transitional period because climate change is the most important agenda for globally the notice. And we are almost finishing our conservation and board meetings to make our own ESG policy. On impact investment in Asia, for example, let me show you some example that we participate to the Japan ASEAN Women Empowerment Fund, which is using microfinance financial technique and to empower the women, female entrepreneurs, mainly in Asia. And actually, 90% of this borrower through this fund is a female entrepreneurs. So that we mobilize a Japanese private fund by means of taking the mezzanine portion of the structural fund, and then we invited a senior debt from the Japanese institutional investors. And also most recently, we participated to the climate change fund sponsored by BlackRock and JBIC, and also our similar institution in Europe, like French Proparco and German KfW also participated as a mezzanine piece. And then the mobilized fund from the private sector, very widely diversified in regionally, that the Asia is roughly in between 30 to 50% in outstanding this fund by BlackRock.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Tadashi. Now, Jatin, if I can go over to you, India, one of the largest economies globally. What can you tell us about the situation there?
I think the situation is rapidly changing. I think India provides an opportunity for both challenge as well as a place for deployment of capital to solving solving those challenges. So, we are at the forefront of dealing with climate change. We have droughts, the increased frequency of droughts. We have now floods. We have extreme intensity of rainfall, which is basically leading to property damage and life, of course, and also food security is now somewhat become volatile. So there are lots of technologies that are being built, technologies, supply chain systems, markets that are being developed around this, and also India is attracting, like companies like ours, attracting that kind of capital to solve those problems.
And who are, if I may address a bit your business model, who are your main investors, and are they primarily based in developing or developed countries?
They're all in developed countries, except for one. Omnivore is one of our investors. It's a food and agri-tech fund based in India, but BlueOrchard is an investor, European. We've got a DMGT, the Daily Mail Group, which is Anglo-American. So yeah, it's mostly Western.
And what is it you need then from public and private investors?
I think, more and more risk capital because the businesses are growing relatively fast, and also people to understand the technical side of that risk, because underwriting, for example, both for insurance and debt in a developing country like India, which is rapidly growing, but risks are idiosyncratic. Also, you need to, if you understand the risk, you invest more wisely.
All right, so if we go then into the realm of solutions, Johanna, there are, of course, different solution approaches, right? Divestments, engagements, et cetera. What has your approach been and why?
It's a very good question. As a responsible investor, we try to think holistically. So when it comes to climate change and climate change risks, both the risks and the opportunity sides are part of our ESG integration approach. And as I said before, Zurich has a net zero strategy. So we also co-founded the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance and now set a 2050 carbon neutral target for the entire 200 billion portfolio of own assets and are breaking it down into steps. So we're looking at the climate risks and opportunities as part of ESG integration to make sure that we avoid stranded assets, that we manage the transition risks consciously, that in the course of that, we step by step decarbonize the portfolio. But the important thing to understand when you look at an investor's portfolio is that those are financed emissions. The emissions are really happening in the real economy, mainly. They're done by corporates, and those corporates need to decarbonize. Now, every single emission that is emitted by a company also exists as its mirror image in the portfolio of any investor around the globe. So as a large investor, we take responsibility for those emissions. But if you divest too early, you basically just place those emissions in another investor's portfolios, right? They don't go down in the real world, not necessarily. So what is really important to us is to engage with companies. We have engagement targets to make sure they set their own science-based targets and they move. The companies that turn around, especially in sectors like electricity generation, energy, transport, but then also the hard-to-abate sectors where a lot of research and development is still needed, those actually require funding to be able to change. So there you need to discern who is changing and those you should keep financing and who isn't, then they become a risk and you shift out. And then last but not least, the entire impact investing piece of it. We've had an impact investing strategy for a while, and our target is to, through our impact investments, help avoid 5 million tons of CO2. So that's how this entire suite of finance the transition, engage with companies, and then rebalance the risks will actually help decarbonize over time.
All right, thank you. And Tadashi, what about you? What has your approach been in terms of these different solutions?
Well, the Japanese government also that's very committed to carbon neutrality by 2050. And we have been playing many countries in Asia, for example, that Vietnam or Indonesia. So still, those countries are depending on fossil fuel as a source of power. And many projects in PPP project in these countries in base of BOT basis. This means that eventually in 20 to 30 years that these assets to be transferred to the government. That's a reality. Therefore, that in my view, that divestment will not provide appropriate solutions. Therefore, our approach is mainly the engagement. For example, that I paid a visit to Vietnam. I had a meeting with the Prime Minister of Vietnam, Nguyen Xuan Phuc, and also key leaders of Vietnam. And then dependency of the Vietnamese government on coal-fired power plants is still in 2040 at that time was roughly 50%. But because of my proposal to transform the source of power from coal-fire to gas or renewable energy, and then also the packages with a proposal of the finance. Therefore, eventually, the Communist Party of Vietnam leadership and also the government of Vietnam accommodated already that my proposal and to change this energy mix policy, which is was announced in March of 2021, and then the most updated draft is the dependence on coal fire have been dramatically reduced from 43% to 27%. So that we also finance that the transitional financing to gas-fired power plants, eventually to be transformed to that renewable energy in the long run. However, that we need to keep that very practical and affordable approach, so that we need to provide some of the technical assistance to find for them for solutions from the viewpoint of the cost, that the cost must be reduced, and for consumers, cost must be affordable. For example, that hydrogen and other source of fuel is still very expensive. Therefore, gradually, we need to transform this and to reduce the cost. This is our approach.
Thank you. Now Jatin, you know, as I'm listening to Rebecca and to Tadashi, I wonder, you know, developed countries, they have the financial means, right, to finance the transition to a green economy perhaps faster and invest both in climate adaptation as well as mitigation. But what about developing countries with limited public resources? Is it fair to expect the same financial contributions?
I think, okay, so I can kind of wear two hats here. India obviously can. There's enough domestic capital, there's enough private capital, the markets are there. And once the policy intent is made very clear, it's happening. It's already renewable is growing at a rapid pace. And you know, motor electrification has just really taken off. I think in 2 years, the landscape will be completely transformed. So definitely. But on the lower rung of poorer and smaller country, that is where I guess support needs to be given, both in terms of technology as well as policy support, implementation support, and the cost of the technologies. But it, you know, that it creates its own momentum. So once countries like India and China are, you know, walk this path, that the technologies will become much cheaper, and they are the companies from these, you know, countries will actually make it more viable in neighboring or relatively poorer countries, because the scale at which they can operate. So it more than a for poorer countries, more than a direct policy intervention, I guess sequence of nudges, you know, will be able to do the trick.
All right, Tadashi, you were just discussing and outlining for us a series of initiatives and things that you have been presenting and working on. So what many people may or may not know is that you are really a pioneer in this area and have supported many of these initiatives to date. How has that journey been for you? I mean, did you encounter a lot of resistance? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Well, you know, most of the countries are now considering to commit the climate change by NDC. Probably in COP26, and many countries will make some commitment. But still, the roadmap to the goal is still uncertain. And also that there are some, you know, for example, that power generation plant, they already existing plants, And developing countries, in particular, they have to take the cost of these existing power plants. Therefore, that replacement and switching from the fossil fuel-based the energy to renewable is very costly for them. Therefore, we need to show that some roadmap, including financing in transition terms, as I said earlier, that's very key. And in my experience, for example, that discussion with the Indonesian leaders and the Vietnamese leaders, they understood that the necessities of the tackle against the climate change and then to transform the fossil fuel to renewable energy. However, the cost is the burden for the people, not just only the government, but the people. Therefore, that they have been hesitating to shift so quickly and prolong the commitment beyond 2050. But this is a global agenda, common agenda for mankind. Therefore, that we need to help the developing countries and they help through some motivating vehicles for developing countries, and also that's mobilizing a private fund so that by means of risk taking, especially during a transition period, this is a load of the developed countries and a load of the government of developed countries, including Japan. So that's we have been working very closely with other partners in US, Australia, for example, and most recently India as well. That this is a very important initiative, not just only G7 but also Quad. Therefore, that this is really the issues which we have to face up.
And speaking of which, Tadashi, I want to switch gears just a little bit now and address something that I believe you touched in your introduction, Johanna. Another important player in the landscape, which is regulation. So, as we all know, there's a number of taxonomies out there. The EU taxonomy, the ASEAN pendant, efforts from individual countries, etc. So, all with the goal of achieving standardization, clear definitions of sustainability, etc., right? Alignment of goals, taking a coordinated approach, and all of these things. All good, right? But with so many taxonomy frameworks in place, I wonder, is it still effective, or, I mean, is it just too much to the point of being ineffective?
For investors, it's always easier to have little fragmentation, so the more harmonized, the better. However, it's always important as well, especially when we look at climate change, transition and adaptation, we have to take a localized view because every country's situation is very different. So, I mean, to the credit of all the people working on all those taxonomies, there is a platform, an international platform for sustainable finance, that's looking to harmonize taxonomies. And for investors, that's useful to the degree that if the logic with which a taxonomy works is standardized, so it's easy to understand how the taxonomy works and how it's supposed to be applied. But then in content, it is adapted when we, speaking about thresholds, for example, to the local context, then that nuance and that variety actually helps. Just an anecdote to that, I was in a call once talking to a colleague who had worked on the ASEAN taxonomy, who made this great example, which is very intuitive, but it's those intuitive things that we keep forgetting, who said the EU taxonomy is for Europe. You people have central heating. So the thresholds for electricity and what is green energy is built on the fact that it's cold outside. It's October right now, it's cold outside, and you all have central heating. We're in Asia, we don't have central heating. It's very hot, it's very humid. So it's all about air conditioning and whether that's done with electricity and green electricity and not little diesel generators anymore. And just that simple fact is we need one logic, but then a bottom-up localized approach to help navigate the differences in which we are, and that is helpful.
That is helpful. And I mean, what would the requirements then be for large international corporations like Zurich in order to accelerate these efforts?
Well, I mean, taxonomies, of course, are helpful. We've been impact investors before, right? And we've had our own definition of what is green and what is a climate solution, what is climate change mitigation and adaptation before. A lot of those things are logical. That being said, taxonomies help. How do we accelerate our efforts? I told you we have a plan. Mm-hmm. And what really helps, of course, is the support of all the players. I mean, we have one planet. CO2 emissions don't have a passport, right? This is a very, very global problem. So we need the regulators, the policymakers, the investors, the corporates, and individuals all make their contribution. And at this point in time, it's often in the regulatory space where we have issues. So using a market, and as an investor, I have to say that, but using market mechanisms really works. But we're not pricing externalities. We still don't have a global price on carbon that is high enough to actually help us move quicker and make better long-term decisions of which technology to invest in and which not. And I'm also talking about corporates who need to move, right? Not only investors.
Yes, I was thinking the same thing. Speaking of standardizing, I mean, the price of carbon is something that has been, talked about so much recently. How do you ensure then that the inequality gap doesn't increase further, and that this transition to the green economy is inclusive and socially equitable when we talk about the price of carbon?
Here we speak about just transition, which is really important, and asking for a price on carbon, right? Price on carbon cannot be set bottom up from the industry. It has to come top down. This is a regulatory decision, and whether it's done via cap and trade markets, like we see the EU ETS or the Chinese ETS, or whether it's done with carbon fees or taxes, that's a policy decision. And every policy can be designed to be socially just and not hit the ones that shouldn't be hit, but place the burden of paying for the externalities where we need the decision-making capacity to decide differently. So just transition, to a large degree, is a policy design decision.
Now, of course, we want to get all of this done ASAP, right? As soon as possible.
Yes, yesterday.
So yesterday, yes, you're right. So if we look towards the future and the ways in which can accelerate this transition, Tadashi, in your opinion, which areas, I know you've already touched a little bit on this, but which areas should be prioritized until 2030 and why? And perhaps what are your expectations for the public, private sector, and even for COP26?
Actually, the cooperation among the DFIs of developed countries are really key. And you discussed about standardization and of the taxonomies, and harmonized taxonomy is very key. And the clarity on investment for the investors is very key. Therefore, that among the cooperation of DFIs in developed countries, in particular G7 summit in June in UK, been already announced that cooperation, especially international public climate finance contribution to be discussed, just a cornerstone towards the discussion, productive discussion in COP26, and also on different agenda for the ocean safety, and also that avoid single-use plastic and contamination in the ocean. To be this is discussing a different framework, COP15. And biodiversity, the platform. So that all of these issues are interrelated, correlated, therefore that we need to have the more transparent and clear messages to be shared, both public and private sectors, also developed and developing countries. So this is our role, and to promote those movements fairly in transparent manner and fairly quickly, and to accomplish our commitment in a really practical manner. So that's our approach.
Thank you. And Jatin, the same question to you. What should be prioritized until 2030 in your opinion, and what are your expectations from the public-private sector, including COP26?
In order of priority, of course, I guess the investment philosophy has to change, especially when it comes to fossil fuels. As I said, there's nothing better than regulatory nudge towards solar or battery-based, say, transport or power, or call it what you may. And the other thing is that people and companies should be rewarded for adopting these technologies, or a better lifestyle, or a better workflow in some way. We all talk about the triple bottom line, But there is this whole thing about we keep on building targets and not achieving them. And right now, there's an argument that my country is making is that how do we account for the kind of financing that developed countries are supposed to? Are they actually meeting their targets? I'm going one level below. I'm saying that as a culture, which comes from a regulatory point of view, that we've got to adapt as well as reward, good climate behavior.
Wonderful. Thank you both gentlemen for joining us today. Tadashi, Jatin, it was a real pleasure. Wonderful to have you on our field trip.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, wishing you a great evening. And Johanna, thank you so much for joining us here in the studio today. Very briefly, what would you prioritize by 2030?
Make a decision that we actually all really want this. Move from talk to action. We have everything that needs to be done by 2030. We just need to get organized and do it.
Perfect. That sounds like some very sound advice. All right. Thank you again all for joining us. Thank you, Johanna, for being with us today. And Philip, Ebony, give it back to you.
Thank you very much for the great insights from our panel. This included public and private sectors, investors as well as investees from both Europe and Asia. So from my side, also thank you very much, Anna Maria and Johanna here in the studio. Thank you very much, Tadashi Maeda and Jatin Singh online for joining us. It's been really great insights and really interesting.
Yes, I fully agree, Philip. Thank you very much to our wonderful panelists and to Anna Maria for leading a great discussion.
And actually, Johanna, she introduced me to one of my favorite social media posts in the last months. And she said, do you know the best climate change typo at the moment? It's called decarbonization. And this really cracked me up. So thanks very much for that, Johanna.
Decarbonization, good one. Thank you, Johanna, for this one, and Philip. Now, moving on, next we will fly to Africa and more specifically to Kenya and Tanzania. We have heard from Russell how paramount education is for sustainable growth, and now Njeri Kirumbi, BlueOrchard Deputy Regional Manager for Africa, who is based in our office in Nairobi, Kenya, will share with us the situation around education finance in sub-Saharan Africa and more specifically Tanzania. Hi, Njeri, can you hear us?
Hello, Ebony. I hear you well.
Fantastic. Great to have you with us. Please share your insights with us.
Great. Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to speak about Tanzania and education in Africa, being an important and exciting topic for BlueOrchard in the region. So to start off, Tanzania, just to give you an overview, has an estimated population of 60 million. It's located in East Africa and shares a border with Kenya. The country is the most densely populated country in the southern part of the equator, and it's the sixth biggest country in Africa. From a GDP perspective, Tanzania has a GDP of $63 billion, so this is slightly below Kenya. And over the last 10 years, it has recorded an average growth rate of 6.2%, with the main economic sectors being agriculture, industry, and services. On the education front, Tanzania has a literacy rate of 78%. So what does this mean? When you look at the average literacy level in Africa, which is 65%, Tanzania ranks slightly higher. However, on the other hand, the net enrollment rate in the country is rather low, especially for the higher education level. The main contributing factors to this are limited quality and affordable education system, but most importantly, the lack of gender parity, as the country records one of the highest dropout rates for girls due to adolescent pregnancy. When we talk of education a bit more broadly and globally, so exclusion from education still remains a global issue, with Africa accounting for nearly 50% of out-of-school children, and the figure is even higher when we look at higher levels of education such as tertiary and technical vocational training. So most governments in Africa would spend approximately 5% of GDP on education, which is low, especially if you compare it to other developing markets. To address this issue, we see that low-cost private education plays a significant role in the education system in the region, as quality is commonly perceived to be better in the private sector. to conclude and give you a broader picture of education in Africa, what you mostly commonly see in the continent is private and public sector work hand in hand. Low-cost private education is not here to substitute government schools, but rather it plays an important complementary role in Africa, given the huge market gap in the education sector that has further widened with the COVID pandemic.
Thank you very much, Njeri. Thanks for this. And as I said, right, the education gap is tremendous, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, and COVID-19 coupled with digital exclusion has really worsened the situation. So let's hear from one of our end clients, Lucy Wilfred. She runs the Kingdom School in Arusha in Tanzania, and she will be interviewed by Njeri live.
Hello, Lucy. Thank you very much for joining us for the virtual field trip. It's a pleasure to have the option to talk to you and hear your story. We very much look forward to hearing about education finance from you as an entrepreneur in the field. So Lucy, could you please briefly introduce yourself and what you're doing for a living?
Thank you very much, Njeri, for your invitation. My name is Lucy Wilfred. I am professionally a teacher. I am a founder and also a manager at the Kingdom School. It is a primary school, enrolls a student from 3 years and completed their primary education aging 12, 13, and the oldest is 14. And this year was our first graduation for our first enrollment class.
Okay, great. Thank you for this overview. So how did it all start? What was your drive and motivation to start Kingdom School?
We have heard that many people say when you pass through a certain environment, it teaches you many lessons. This motive of starting a school started all over from my heart, reflecting the real environment or the real life I grew up. I am an orphan. I lost both my parents when I was 9 months. So I went through some difficulties during my education, progress in different stages, and also in the physical life, I mean the social life, being in different families in the course of my time. So when I grew up having difficulties in my education, after I have accomplished my diploma education, I thought, okay, I am an orphan and I went through this difficult environment. Perhaps I am not alone. There are so many orphans and students from underserved environment who have no one to shake their hand or who have no one to help to reach their dreams. So I just looked back where I came from and I say, okay, I passed through this environment. Let me do something for my fellow orphans or for the society to show that the way and to tell them.
All right, that's a very good story and motivation as to why you started Kingdom School. So then could you please just tell us a bit more on how the loan has helped you in building and also running the school?
Yeah, it helped me a lot because by that time we had any capital. What we had was our living house. So when the kids studied there in the nursery classes for 2 years, we were now needed to build a class for their primary education. So after taking the loan, we started our first class. We constructed our first class, which was used by the class 1 who started in class 1. Now it was officially the primary education. So the loan was the only thing we had, which has helped us to construct the class. So it was a big help to us. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned that you first had your graduation class recently. How does that feel?
Wow. It was, for me, it was like a miracle. And I was in tears because I knew I was going somewhere, but not as happy as this much. I was so excited to see my 2 girls graduate, and the first one we started with them, specifically the orphan. For me, it was the happiest moment I have experienced.
Thank you very much. So then education has seems to be quite important. Maybe if you could just provide us with your opinion on what role education plays, as well as why is education so close to your heart?
Yeah, my dear Jerry, education is very, very important. Because when a child gets the chance to get education, and we can see the education system starts with from 3 years to 14 years. Can you imagine? Now, a child being in school for those 14 years, it is the only safe way to keep them from any other arrogant and other bad behaviors like drugs, like early pregnancies, like child labor. So for me, the student being in school from that age to 14 is nearly the age of self-awareness. So the first important of education is to safeguard the kid to be in the safe environment. Going to school in the morning and going back home in the evening, it's a safe environment for her or him not to involve in difficult or in dangerous actions like I have mentioned. Also, the second thing, education, it's like an eye-opener, not only to orphan, but to anybody, like it's an eye-opener. For me, as Lucy, I inherited nothing from my parents, only education. And you can see now, I am a teacher, I am manager, I am mother, I am wife. And for me, a good inheritance to give a child is the education. It opens his eyes, her eyes, it shows him the way, it tells him about the world, it tells him what to do, what not to do, how to do it. It gives the confidence to them that you can be somebody, you can be pilot, you can be doctor, you can be a nurse.
Thank you, Lucy. I like the way you said it, that education is the best inheritance you can give to your child. You have actually mentioned about social life. What are your, currently, what are your biggest needs and the needs of the families that you're supporting?
Well, the biggest need is just continuing with the education, because they have reached the standard 7 from Kingdom School. They needed to go to secondary school, they needed to go to colleges and to the universities to at least to have the good grades of education. That is their biggest need, their children to be educated. Because we believe if you educate the children will come back to help the society and the family, as I am doing.
All right, thank you very much indeed. We're really grateful to hear from you, Lucy, and especially insights on the field and on education finance in Tanzania. It was a great insight from your end, and we do appreciate your availability to be with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jerry, for interviewing me.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you so much to Njeri. And now I'm super excited. We live have Lucy with us. Hi, Lucy. Hello to Arusha. Can you hear us?
Yes. Hello. How are you?
Fantastic. I'm very well. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. You are a true inspiration. Really. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I now actually have someone who would like to talk to you, Lucy.
Yes.
Hi. Hi, Lucy. It's Peter here. So great hearing you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for these inspiring words. You know, I mean, Lucy, we've been knowing each other for many, many years, and I've been able to follow your incredible journey. It's so inspiring. So congratulations for everything you have achieved. One of the strongest women I've personally ever met. Fantastic. Can I maybe just ask you one question, Ebony? What is the current situation in Arusha? All the children, are they back in school? Are you giving normal hours, or is everything still a little bit under agony?
Yeah, thank you so much. Everything is going on well, and they are all in school. They are getting their daily education programs and the other services. So everything is going on well, despite of the light challenges, but everything is okay.
Fantastic. And let me allow one more question because, of course, I'm an insider. How is Wilfred, your husband, doing? Because for the audience, I think he has been basically your first employee, if I dare to say. Is that correct?
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. My husband, Wilfred, is doing very well, and he's working in school together with me. So we are cooperating together to see that everything is going on well. And he's giving his most energy and time and love to the school. And I am strong because I have the strongest man behind me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lucy. Hopefully we will be able to travel soon into Tanzania in the next couple of weeks. I hope we'll see each other very soon again. Thank you for joining. Very insightful. Back to you, Ebony.
Okay. Thank you so much, Peter. And thank you also very, very much again, Lucy. You are, as I said, a true inspiration. And we have really, we're getting bombarded with all of these questions. We are very sorry. We're trying to take as many as we can. But now, in light of time, please allow us to go to our next destination. And our last and final destination for today is India, and a topic which is very close to my heart, women empowerment.
I'm with you here, Ebony. I'm the father of 3 girls, so I'm with you there.
I love it.
And one of the countries really where gender inequality is still prevalent is India. And although a lot of progress has been made, especially in more urban areas, a lot remains to be done.
Correct, Philip. Now, before we hear from one of our micro-entrepreneurs, let's listen to Sevara Mukamed, BlueOrchard's Regional Director for Eurasia. Sevara is joining us live, and here she is. Hi, Sevara, how are you?
Hi, Sevara.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, warm welcome to the next virtual trip destination, India. India is really famous for its unique ancient culture and as origin for many great discoveries and inventions. Indeed, India is the land of contrasts in many ways, but unfortunately some show evidence of social problems and disbalances. India ranks the 3rd among countries with most billionaires, but at the same time, it's also home for 1/3 of poorest population globally. India is among 5 largest producers of agricultural products, but at the same time scores 6th worst in the global hunger index. In addition to these problems and other problems which are really common for many Indians, Indian women suffer from various types of discrimination, which make India the most unsafe country for women. BlueOrchard, in partnership with local financial institutions, is trying to address these problems by providing funding to women entrepreneurs to start or expand their businesses, to gain self-confidence, to become financially independent. And last but not the least, by volume of investments, India ranks the 1st among countries within our global investment portfolio.
Thank you very much, Sevara. Very sobering facts and figures, but unfortunately the sad reality, not only in India, but still way too many countries. And as Monica Beck outlined before, it's not only in emerging markets, but across the globe, right?
Yes, Philip, you're absolutely right. But fortunately, there are also millions of success stories out there, and let's hear the story from one of those individuals. Her name is Prem Devi, and she runs a garment store in Rajasthan. Our Pranav Murari, Senior Investment Officer at BlueOrchard, interviewed Prem for us, and this is her story.
नमस्ते, शुक्रिया आपका हमसे बात करने के लिए। आप क्या अपना नाम बता सकती हैं और अपना परिचय दे सकती हैं? आप क्या करती हैं? आपके फैमिली में कितने लोग हैं?
मेरा नाम प्रेम है और छोटा बिजनेस है मेरा, उसको अब इसके अंदर थोड़ा बड़ा करना चाहती हूँ। ये और बड़ा है, बढ़ाया नहीं, फाइनेंस से लिया मैंने लोन और अच्छे किए मैंने।
अच्छा, और आपके फैमिली में कितने लोग हैं?
फैमिली में एक लड़का है, 2 लड़की है।
अच्छा,
डिपेंड के साथ साथ
आपको पूरा सपोर्ट मिला है ये अपना बिजनेस करने में?
बहुत अच्छा सपोर्ट मिला मुझे।
बहुत
आगे और भी सपोर्ट मिलेगा मुझे बहुत अच्छा।
बहुत अच्छा, ये सुन के बहुत अच्छा लगा। आपका आई फाइनेंस के साथ कैसा रहा है अभी तक एक्सपीरियंस?
बहुत अच्छा व्यवहार है हमारा, इतना अच्छा रिकॉर्ड बहुत अच्छा है हमारा, और आगे भी और अच्छा रिकॉर्ड चाहेंगे हम, ये अच्छा होए।
तो आपने आई फाइनेंस से लोन लेना क्यों के बारे में क्यों सोचा?
सर मैंने सोचा कि छोटा बिजनेस था, इसलिए मैंने इसमें और बढ़ाने के लिए और आगे मैंने सोचा था, इसलिए मैंने आई फाइनेंस से सपोर्ट लिया है।
ये बहुत अच्छा लगा सुन के। आई फाइनेंस ने आपको और लोन के अलावा और कोई मदद मिला है आपको आई फाइनेंस से?
सर मुझे कोरोना के अंदर भी थोड़ा सपोर्ट भी दिया था, और कोरोना में मेरे थोड़ा सा हालत बहुत खराब थे, पर इन्होंने मुझे बहुत सपोर्ट दिया है। आई फाइनेंस बहुत अच्छा।
अच्छा, तो कोरोना के अलावा आपके बिजनेस में आपको सबसे ज्यादा बाधाएं क्या लगती हैं?
धंधा है सर, मुझे ना थोड़ा सा ऐसे लगता है कि कभी कभी ऐसे होता है, कभी नहीं होता है कि भाई कभी गिराई हुए कभी ना हुए ऐसे।
अच्छा जी, तो आप फाइनली आप क्या चाहती हैं? आप इस बिजनेस से अपने ये वाले बिजनेस से, अपने बीड़ी वाले बिजनेस से आपका फाइनली चाहती क्या है? इतना आप पैसा कमा के आप किसके लिए कमाती हैं?
मैं इसको आगे और बढ़ाऊंगी, और बड़ा बिजनेस और आगे बढ़ाऊंगी, और उससे भी बड़ा शोरूम बन रहा है, उसके अंदर और सपोर्ट चाहिए।
अच्छा, और आपने बताया कि आपकी 2 बेटियां हैं। आपकी 2 बेटियां हैं ना, और 1 बेटा?
हाँ सर।
हाँ, तो आपके बच्चों के लिए आपने क्या सोचा है? उनके फाइनली बड़े होके वो लोग क्या करेंगे? लड़के के लिए और लड़कियों दोनों के लिए?
देखो सर, दोनों लड़की तो बड़ी हो जाएगी, उसका सारा उसका बड़े बच्चे पढ़ रहे हैं, और उसके बाद लड़का है, दोनों माँ बेटे आराम से बिजनेस करेंगे, दुकान चलाएंगे अच्छा, और लड़की बड़ी हो जाएगी, ससुराल चली जाएगी, बच्चों को पढ़ाएंगे, इनको पैरों पे खड़े करेंगे। माँ का यही फर्ज है, बच्चों को पढ़ाना लिखाना, पैरों पे खड़ा करना।
पर क्या लड़कियों को भी आप काम करने को बोलेंगे? लड़कियां भी बिजनेस करेंगी अपना?
सर मेरी देखो बिजनेस संभाल रही है ना, ये देखो बिजनेस संभाल रही है।
अच्छा,
कस्टमर को संभालती है।
अच्छा, ये
हम
बिजनेस,
तीनों
हाँ जी बोलिए।
चारों मिलके हम अपना बिजनेस हम संभालते हैं, नौकर नहीं रखते हैं, हम खुद ही संभालते हैं।
अच्छा, और आपको इस बिजनेस का आइडिया कहाँ से आया कि आप ये कपड़े का बिजनेस शुरू करें?
सर आइडिया मुझे दुकान थी खाली, मैंने देखा कि कुछ करें अपन, बैठे बैठे क्या करें, इसके पापा नहीं है तो फिर कुछ ना कुछ तो करना चाहिए ना। फिर इसमें से मैंने थोड़ा सा छोटा लोन लिया पहले, फिर मैंने बड़े लोन लेने की आशा रखी, मैंने कहा बड़ा लूंगी अब, फिर बड़ा बिजनेस चलाया मैंने आगे, इसलिए
बहुत
मैंने
अच्छा,
छोटा लोन लिया।
बहुत अच्छा। अच्छा, आपसे बात करके बहुत अच्छा लगा, शुक्रिया अपना टाइम देने के लिए,
थैंक यू सर।
एंड हमारी गुड विशेस, सारी शुभकामनाएं आपके लिए।
थैंक यू सर, थैंक यू।
Wow, such an inspiring story. Thank you so much, Prem. You're really a light. Please continue to be such an inspiration for many around you, especially girls and women. And now we have live Pranav with us. Pranav, thank you so much for conducting the interview, and welcome back again, Sevara. I know we are trying to get in touch with Prem, but as Peter's mentioned earlier, these are different local circumstances. So for now, I'll continue with some questions, and we received plenty of those. Maybe to start off with you, Sevara. The question is, India has faced one of the most restrictive lockdowns initially and a deadly second wave. How did microfinance institutions manage client repayments and liquidity around these restrictions?
Yeah, in fact, the first wave, I would say, was more like a learning experience for institutions to prepare for the second wave, because many faced constraints in terms of collecting payments, in terms of disbursing loans, in terms of actually conducting group meetings. But most of the institutions adapted pretty well during the first wave and during the massive lockdowns that India faced last year. They recovered their financial conditions in 3 to 4 months after lockdowns were already lifted. And I would say that, again, I would welcome Pranav to add to this, but I would say that based on our observations, the second wave was, they're much more prepared, much better prepared for a second wave, and they entered it. So Pranav, please add to that.
Yeah, thanks, Savara. I think you've touched on important points. I think what the government also did initially was that they directed government-owned TFIs to provide subsidized funding to a lot of these MFIs initially, which did help these MFIs to maintain adequate liquidity. Apart from that, the MFIs in general, I think they understood initially that the focus would have to be on liquidity. They followed an extremely conservative disbursement policy. And some of them also managed to receive good amount of support from their equity shareholders, which did help. The mandated moratorium that was provided by the RBI was transferred to the final borrowers. And the MFIs are still, restructuring loans on a case-by-case basis where there are genuine issues. And I think finally, the second wave, like Savara did mention, the MFIs were more prepared. And apart from that, I think the government was also more prepared for it this time. And microfinance was deemed as an essential service. So collections were not as hit as they were in the first wave.
Okay, thank you so much, Savara and Pranav. And I know we're running out of time, but I think this last question is very important. And since Prem could not be with us, Pranav, could you maybe try to answer that question, knowing the locals, the insights very, very well? The question is, what are the tools and support that you think are important for women to have to successfully run their own business in India and in smaller towns?
Thanks, Ebony. That's a great question. Yes, to be fair, I think this is a topic I did touch with Prem separately which was not covered in the recording. And, I think from her perspective, what she's trying to do, I think one thing that did not come out of the interview very clearly was that 7 years ago, she lost her husband. And that's when she had to, gather the courage and jump into this whole business, which is what she did. So I think her focus largely for her kids, especially her daughters and her son, is on education. But apart from that, I think based on her experiences, what she's also trying to do is give her kids a little bit of work experience, which especially for the women would give them more courage and more confidence to jump into these businesses, given that they already will have the tools required to kind of succeed.
Excellent, thank you. And that actually goes back to what Lucy shared with us earlier, and education is the best inheritance. And with that, thank you so much, Savara. Thank you so much, Pranav. We truly appreciate it. And next up, we have our second panel.
Great, yes, thank you very much. Also from my side, we have another great panel on a very relevant topic. We have heard all these inspiring insights now, but how do you actually manage and measure impact? BlueOrchard has been at the forefront of impact management for 2 decades now with our dedicated team and impact framework. Right, Ebony?
Yes, Philip, we have. And talking about women empowerment, I am very excited to have 3 power women with us now. Anna Maria, welcome back. I hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Ebony. A pleasure, of course, to be back on the field trip with everybody and in the company of these power ladies. Maria Teresa Sapia, Chief Impact and Blended Finance Officer, Deputy CEO of BlueOrchard. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Carolina Minio Paluelo. She is Global Head of Product Solutions and Quant at Schroders London.
Hello.
So great to have you. I love the intro. Love that we're talking about how to measure success and, of course, female empowerment. But I think we're going to focus more on the first bit today. So as Peter Harrison, Schroders Peter, as opposed to BlueOrchard Peter, mentioned, between Schroders' 200 years of mainstream asset management and BlueOrchard's 20 years of impact investing, I mean, the end result is like more than 2 centuries of experience, right? And together, working towards building for positive change, going beyond profit, and by using a unique combination of developed and emerging market, frontier market, knowledge and innovation, investment strategies across private and public sectors. So definitely it seems like a dream team combo. And speaking of which, and speaking of tackling challenges together, Maria Teresa, how does it work in practice, for example, between BlueOrchard and Schroders?
Yeah, so it's fantastic because it's now almost 2 years. So it's spot on since the collaboration started. And since then, this has been an amazing partnership in really across a range of different topics, but in particularly on sustainability and impact. So effectively, the collaboration has demonstrated that Schroders and BlueOrchard jointly can be on the forefront in terms of sustainability and impact. And you can see here from the slide that this has really put us on a market positioning where sustainability and impact are the key defining characteristics. So well beyond what a range of asset managers have been doing in traditional and responsible investing, where sustainability and impact is implemented mostly really as a regulatory or a compliance topic. And since I like examples, I'll go on a little example. Both Schroders and BlueOrchard are part of the G7 Impact Task Force led by the UK government. And there we have very different roles. BlueOrchard is in the working group, really trying to showcase investment solutions into the just transition, talking about COP26. And on the other side, Schroders is sitting with the group CEO himself in the advisory council, really thinking how asset managers and asset owners can mobilize capital into, just transition investment solutions. So for me, that is a perfect, showcase of how the collaboration top-down and bottom-up, we can really be additional to the market.
So I have to turn the question around to you, Carolina, now. What is unique from your perspective, about working together with BlueOrchard?
I think, as you said, it's kind of a dream come true, because if you had to summarize the journeys, BlueOrchard is market leader in impact, comes from the private assets into the more liquid space. We do the other journey. We come from the public, going to the private. And I would say we start from understanding the sustainability risk, going into impact, understanding and measuring impact. But if we go back to actually the ambition or what we're trying to do today, is the fact that we see risk, the risk dimension, effectively extending and expanding to incorporate the impact that companies have on society. So for us, the social impact that companies have is becoming a financial cost on companies, on the business model, because of regulation. So today, what we are saying is that effectively it's time for impact to become a third dimension along risk and returns. And actually talking about our Peter, he talks about impact-adjusted profits. So this is a huge ambition. So nothing more important than having partners like BlueOrchard to do that. And actually to be specific on what we are going to do from here. All morning we talked about climate changes, we talk about transition, mitigation, adaptation. I think we need to add carbon capture. We need to add preserving our carbon sinks. This is the world of natural capital. And this is a sector, this is a new asset class that both Schroders and BlueOrchard are looking and will look together.
And from what I hear, I mean, it makes complete sense, right? This working together and joining forces. But I have to ask, is the market big enough?
Yeah, and that's a good question, right? I mean, I think that the absorption capacity of markets is always something that is put forward. Well, interesting enough that the market, and I think my Peter, in fact, at the beginning of the session referred to it, the impact investing market in 2020 and has really grown significantly. And if you look in particularly at the private assets part of the chart on the left-hand side, you can see that the impact investing assets under management have actually reached almost $2.3 trillion. And this is, a largely defined, if you want, labeling for impact investing, where you have both measure and intended impact. But still, $2.3 trillion, it's, a huge, effectively market opportunity. On the other side, there's been a lot of movement as well in the liquid space. As you know, BlueOrchard has been developed over the past 3 years, really dedicated investment solutions in the liquid space. And there you can see again that there's been terrific growth over the past 2 years. We're showing here on the graph on really all the space that concerns green bonds, sustainability-linked bonds, sustainability bonds, and social bonds. The growth has been almost 70%, and the outstanding bond issuances are $1.2 trillion. And if anything, we expect in the next 12 to 18 months to really double. But of course, I'm here talking a bit in the turf of Carolina, the liquid space that she said. So I better, give her the floor now.
Thank you, Maria Teresa. But I think this is always the key question. We spend a lot of time saying what is more pure, what is better impact. And let's face it, when you're in the private space, you know exactly what you finance. So clearly you can have a better assessment of the contribution. But private assets is a small part of the portfolios. Here we want to have contribution, we want to have impact. We need the entirety of the portfolios, we need the entirety of the asset classes. So BlueOrchard has a very good example in the fixed income side. In the fixed income world, we are lucky that there is a part of the liquid world, which is the green bond, the social bond, where when you buy this bond in the liquid space, you know where the use of proceeds are going to be. So you have a better assessment of what you are going to finance. And of course, those market today is relatively small. It will grow. But of course, we need the broader market. And that's why I think it's very important that when you go to the broader market, you rely much more on the estimations. But at the end of the day, you have the size. So if you think about the fixed income, it's a good example. BlueOrchard has launched a climate bond strategy that uses the green bond, the social bonds in the emerging market. We, on our side, have launched in the developed market credit bonds portfolios that invest in issuers that, for instance, are committed to being net zero by 2025, 2040. And of course, it's a question of estimating and measuring that those companies are true to their commitment. But also, as active managers, we have the ability to engage. And that is something that is very important, that we encourage, put a bit of pressure on companies towards this transition, and then, of course, deciding whether or not we keep them in our portfolios. If they are transitioning, we will. If we think they fall behind, we have an opportunity to come out. And that's also how we can influence the cost of capital.
A little pressure could be a good thing. I have to agree with you. Now, you just mentioned measuring, impact measurement, and it's something that we kicked off our panel mentioning, of course. So, because we've talked about impact and building positive change, and it would be just great to understand exactly how you measure this success, because ultimately, and I believe you've told me this on more than one occasion, Maria Teresa, you can only manage what you can measure.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm just thinking that I've been telling you all the secrets already, so there you are. No, so I think it's absolutely crucial. I mean, measurement and generally impact measurement and management is at the heart of what BlueOrchard does. It's actually what gets us out of bed every morning, if I may be a bit personal on this. And it's really something on which we have spent all our resources across the companies in terms of really trying to get it right. And really, we have developed now over almost, dare to say, 15 years, an impact management and a measurement system that has been upgraded over time. Is now called B-Impact. And it's really a holistic approach that we have been taking, really, if you want, looking at different aspects, like, looking at the ESG assessments of, sustainability risks. So looking very closely at the environmental, social, and governance practices of the investees or issuers that we are selecting and partnering with, as well as really looking carefully at the impact that we can reach together with our investees or issuers. So there again, the topic is how can we really go farther. And so we have created this, B-Impact framework, starting from financial inclusion and fixed income, looking at the so-called the spirit ESG, the spirit impact assessment, and also the mapping of our impact to the Sustainable Development Goals. And then we have, over time, really expanded this to cover other asset classes and other sectors. So today we have this really very well rigorous system that can apply to financial inclusion, to private equity, to sustainable infrastructures, to education finance. And so we're very proud because, as I said, this is really what gets us out of bed. But as usual, I think we are in perfect partnership here, because certainly on the liquid space, there are some very interesting tools that have been I had the opportunity to look at Schroders, and I think the one that I find absolutely incredible, and just because it looks at the topics of externalities, is SustainX, and I think Carolina knows it by heart, so I'll again pass the baton to her.
Thank you. And I think Anna Maria, when you're talking about we need to measure, we need to demonstrate, that's where regulations has come very hard on us, because everyone is talking about ESG integration, but at the end of the day, we need to demonstrate it, right? And so that's why for us it was very important to build our own tools. And yes, SustainX for us is very important. It's our way of assessing or starting to assess the different dimension of this transition risk, right, that I was referring to before, assessing the impact that company have on society and what does it trigger in terms of repercussion on the business model. And so that has been for us very important. And actually all our portfolio managers in the liquid space across equities, fixed income, and multi-asset, they're using this tool to assess this risk and to demonstrate how we are risking. So don't forget, we are talking about 700 billion. We're not talking about one portfolio manager using it. This is across the board of our portfolio management side. And today we spoke a lot about climate, and I think climate also requires particular attention. Alongside SustainX, we developed Carbon VaR. It really is an assessment of the impact on the business model of each companies of a carbon pricing going above 100. And this is really what I would call assessing the risk. Now, once we start from there, then, as I was mentioning before, we need to come into assessing the contribution, the impact we're having, the alignment to the SDGs, and that's where we have tools like ThemeX that estimates whether or not a universe in the liquid space has the impact that it says it has. And that's also another place where Maria Teresa and I work very closely, because at the end of the day, with their experience, their understanding of mapping to SDGs, they can, of course, come and work with us on this universe to make it more pure and much more rigorous estimations.
Like I said, dream team. Okay, so we have time for one question from the audience. Of course, we've gotten several, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to give you the one. One of our viewers wants to know, if you want to start, Maria Teresa, what is the next frontier in impact management?
Wow. Okay, so I can see that I'm a little pressure here. Well, I think the one thing that has really proven to be very crucial, also, I mean, for people reading the newspapers these days, is transparency. I think there has been a big focus on really learning from not, if you want, overselling and try to avoid, greenwashing and impact washing. And so transparency and disclosure for me are really the two must for now, but also for the future. I mean, it's interesting, the sustainable finance disclosure regulation is in fact pushing for, all of us saying that, we have an impact to effectively disclose how we integrate impact in the investment process, in our tools, in our processes. So, really overall, I would say transparency, disclosure. and also consolidation of standards. We have seen more and more, for example, asset managers signing up to the operating principle for impact management. And there, really the fundamentals is you disclose what you do and how you are aligned to these 9 principles, and also you go through a process of external verification of your impact management and how this is integrated in the investment process. So if I had to say 3 words, it's transparency, disclosure, and external verification.
All right, Carolina, parting thoughts, our last comments before we close the panel.
Well, Anna Maria, as a quant, I will always tell you, and the people always say to me, you always talk about data, but I think it's important, connecting to your point, Maria Teresa, we need data, we need better data. And if you think, going back to our ambition of impact becoming a 3rd dimension, one day we will get there, because we'll need to be able to quantify better. Today we have better data in the liquid space, of course, but in the large cap, in the developed market, we need that to extend. And in the meantime, though, we need to compensate it doing our own work, our portfolio managers working very closely with the ESG team. But at the end of the day, this is a space that, if we want to go fast, we'll need to collaborate much more into this space and trying to get some standard.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, ladies, for your thoughts and for your insights today. I really appreciate it. Loved hanging out with my power ladies here on set from Blue Orchard and from Schroders. And I think we're actually wrapping up the entire program here. So I'm going to give it back to Ebony and Philip to bring it home. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. I mean, many thanks to our panel for the great discussion, and a big thank you from our side. It was a real pleasure for Ebony and myself to take you on a field trip. And I really also want to thank everyone involved, and of course my colleagues from the Blue Orchard management, specifically Felix Hermes and Daniel Peru, who could not be here, and everyone else which was working hard to make this happen. So on my side, I just want to tell you something which is really close to my heart. We really enjoy what we do, and we are extremely proud of what we could achieve so far. So it's with that pride that I can present to you our latest Blue Orchard Impact Report. We launched it today. The report is fully digital. It provides you with the hard data and the impact that we could make so far. So please, Ebony, if you could do me the favor to refresh this. So this impact report is available as of now on our website. We invite you to have a closer look. It's really a great, dynamic and insightful report. It will provide you with really the hard data. We also look forward to stay in touch with you. We invite you to join our events, workshops, and webinars.
Yeah, and sorry to jump in here, but just to let you know, we received plenty of questions, and we are truly sorry that we could not answer all of them, but we guarantee you that we will get back to you individually after the field trip.
Great, thanks. And you can also meet us at industry events. The next one will be COP26. So with that said, this is it from us, from the field, as your field and virtual field trip guides. And we're now really happy to hand back to Peter Fanconi and Peter Harrison.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much, Philip. Thank you, Ebony. You guys are doing a phenomenal job. I hope you're not going to start any Netflix series casting soon, because you definitely would deserve doing that. But thank you so much. We are running to the end of our field trip. I think I'll ask you for 2 or 3 more minutes, if you dare. I also heard from my ear that you actually are all still online, which is, phenomenal. So thank you very much for participating and being here. We were talking about Blue Orchard 20th anniversary. I would also like to just show you in 30 seconds a little gift we prepared for all of you. And we call this the Virtual Impact Guide we have prepared here. And I would like to show you how this works, because it's going to be online as of today. And it should be, some aid and support for all of you out there in really guiding yourselves through all these topics and terminologies of impact. So this is the Impact Guide. You basically can scroll up here, and it gives you some explanation how this basically works. And what is crucial is there are 5 steps to create your own personal impact. And you are led through 5 questions doing that. And there's a token here where you can actually start the show, where you will be asked, question number 1, which impact do I want to achieve? So you've got a number of topics you can choose, for example, job creation or education. You can move forward to the next step. What liquidity and risk profile are you looking for? So randomly choose, private debt and listed equity as an example. Move forward to the next step. What is my geographical focus? So as you've been hearing today, let's concentrate on developing country, for example. We move forward and finally end up with the question, so what is the adequate impact investing vehicle? Which obviously there are different options. Let's assume it's an impact fund you're looking for. And finally, coming back to our great panelists, where we just learned a lot about measuring. How do you actually want to measure the impact, okay? So take a choice here, and beneficiaries submit your results, and you can do this obviously all on your PC, and you will end up with your personalized feedback, obviously also providing you a very clear matching of the SDGs, and eventually obviously also indicating to you what kind of products are available for you also as an investor. So please have a look, check it out. It's available as of today. And with that said, I would like to make a very last connection. As I learned, there are 2 Peters, and never really thought about that today. But so I would like to invite my dear colleague Peter Harrison back to the closing remarks of today. Let's see if we can invite you on screen, Peter, if you are back.
Peter,
perfect.
Hi.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining back, Peter. Great pleasure having you here. We have been, talking and learning, tremendous amount of topics, in different aspects. I mean, maybe if I could just ask you, generally speaking, from your perspective, having a view basically on the global investment world, is that meeting a little bit your expectations? And what is it actually from your side we will be able to expect from a Schroders perspective in the years to come?
Thank you, Peter. And look, what a difference the world has made in the last 3 years. Since you last did one of these tours. But I think it's absolutely the case that the world has come to Blue Orchard in that time, Peter. So your foresight has been extraordinary in that regard. Look, I think there's no shortage of issues to address, and to my mind, what I've loved about today is we've really touched on the big ones. But a week before COP, we're still on path for 2.7 degrees of global warming. Today there's still 1 in 5 children not being allowed to go to school. 49% of the world is vaccinated, but only 3% of low-income economies have been vaccinated. I mean, these are awful statistics. 50% more wealth is with men than women. So I think all the issues we've talked on today are so pertinent to everything that needs doing and addressing in the world. And what I loved today was we talked about the top-down. Carolina and Johanna from Zurich talk about the things we need to do to companies to change them, to get them to set science-based targets, to get that transparency. And I have to say, as an organisation that said it's going to halve its carbon in the next 9 years, it's really hard to do some of these things. But we can put a lot of pressure on companies to do them. And I think from a top-down perspective, I see a lot of opportunity for that change to be driven. And I'm quite optimistic that we can really force top-down change. But the thing that I've loved about today, Peter, is that you're driving the bottom-up change, and it's so inspiring. When I listened to Lucy talking about her school, it brought a tear to my eye, because what you've done is empowered somebody who would not have otherwise been able to drive real bottom-up change and change education, and seeing her class graduate. I mean, what better than that? So for me, I take away that Schroders can be 100% committed to a better and more sustainable future, but it's going to be putting power in the hands of more Lucys that's really going to drive change. So it's been a great morning for me. It's been great to hear bottom up what you've been up to. So thank you, Peter, and I also a great many thanks to everybody who stayed the course. It would have been more fun in the field, but it's been really good of you to join us online.
Thank you so much, and I fully agree. It would have been more fun in the field. I think we would have had some logistical problems though with all of you attending, but be aware, of course, we will start doing physical field trips. And all of you are invited to join us. Give us a call. Basically tell us what kind of needs you might have. In case you're interested to dig down in some of these stories we've been talking about, National Geographic published this lovely book on Blue Orchard and called "This Is My Story," really giving evidence of all these fantastic stories. So with that said, I think we finally come to an end. 5 minutes overdue has been fantastic. I would like to say a very warm thank you to all the participants and panelists. For the ones of you who are physically in Zurich, can I please ask you to join the stage here? Tamina, thank you so much. Ebony, Chris, Xenia, Victoria, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for the panelists. Thank you for everybody on the phone. Maeda-san, has been a great honor having you on the show as well. And with that said, Peter, I'll say goodbye in the name of all of us. Have an enjoyable rest of the day. It's great being all with you. Onward and upward. Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.